It's Patrick Hutzel from IntensiveCareHotline.com, where we instantly improve the lives for families of critically ill patients in intensive care so that you can make informed decisions, have peace of mind, real power, real control, and so that you can influence decision making fast, even if you're not a doctor or a nurse in intensive care. This is another episode of Your Questions Answered, and in last week's episode I answered another question in a series of questions from my client Melissa, and the question last week was part 1 of my 78-year-old mum has lung cancer and developed an infection. She's in ICU on the breathing tube. Can she get off it or will she need a tracheostomy? And that was part 1 of this new series of questions that we're publishing here at IntensiveCareHotline.com. You can check out last week's episode by clicking on the link below this video. In this week's episode of Your Questions Answered, I want to answer the next question in this series of questions from my client Melissa, which are excerpts from phone and email counseling and consulting sessions with me. And the question this week is part 2 of my 78-year-old mum has lung cancer and developed a chest infection. She's in ICU on the breathing tube. Can she get off it or will she need a tracheostomy? So Melissa writes, Hi Patrick. So we asked all the questions you advised us to, but the doctors dismissed all of them. He said, and I quote, as I have told you 18 times, now she's not to get better. They have not done any physiotherapy with her and refused to do so. The doctor, and I call him Dr. Death, said, and I quote, 10% chance that the rehab we want her to go to will take her. Her insurance Medicaid only pays to a certain point. The doctor told us we will be in the poorhouse. His exact words were, keeping her alive will have consequences for your children, money-wise. I have asked the doctor 8 times to never bring up pulling the plug. Also, the hospice said they'd pay for a bed and other stuff if we bring her home. The doctors in intensive care says the hospice is incorrect and they will not pay anything unless we agree to remove the tube and let her die, because they don't deal with people on ventilators nor pay for equipment. The hospice only deals with people who are dying. Who can we believe? He actually asked my dad if his kids know, and I quote, that keeping her alive will have consequences for us. I guess the doctor means our inheritance, which frankly I don't care about. I love my mum dearly and would certainly give my life for her. And I'm not one to care about money. I thought that was distasteful and I had to leave because it made me sick. I know my mum wants the tracheostomy, but I withdrew my consent because as soon as we said yes to the tracheostomy, they wanted to do it tomorrow. We have 8 inches of snow coming and can't be with her, but he scoffed at me and said it's a quick, harmless procedure and we don't need to be there. I said she'd be scared and the doctor said no, she wouldn't. I feel worse than before. Please advise, from Melissa. Before I give Melissa my response, if you want one-on-one phone, email and Skype counseling and consulting with me, please click on the top of the website and select the options that are best for you, and I'll talk to you soon. So here is my response. Hi Melissa. I'm very sorry to hear that you are dealing with such unethical and quite frankly rude doctors. I can only imagine how you and your family must feel after they have spoken to you so rudely and also inappropriately. They are trying to avoid the detailed questions by just saying she's not going to get better. The devil in this situation is in the detail, and as long as they are not sharing chest x-ray results, arterial blood gases, etc., they are not being open and transparent, but we will get them to that point. First of all, it sounds to me like the doctors are very dismissive of your concerns, and the sad truth is that I'm not surprised by it. Just because they dismissed your questions once doesn't mean they will dismiss them twice. Persistence is the key. The fact of the matter is that 99% of the families of critically ill patients in intensive care make no informed decisions. They have no peace of mind, no control, no power, and no influence. Unfortunately, the doctors in intensive care know that they can get away with this sort of behavior with 99% of the families in intensive care who are intimidated by their perceived power and their perceived authority of the intensive care team. The doctors and the intensive care team know that, and as soon as you start asking the right questions, they become defensive and rude. They know that you are starting to do your own research, and they know that you have no time to take any prisoners. I'm really glad you keep reminding them of not mentioning to withdraw treatment or, quote unquote, pulling the plug. They need to hear this over and over again, because as I mentioned before, they are so used to get what they want, even if it means stopping or withdrawing treatment against a family's wishes. It's rather shocking, and I know from experience that's how families in intensive care are often being dealt with, and I know for a fact that if you don't question, if you don't put on the brakes, and if you continue to be intimidated by the perceived power and the perceived authority of the intensive care team, there is a very good chance they will kill your mother. If you don't continue to challenge them, they will tell you that stopping or withdrawing treatment or pulling the plug, as you referred to, is quote unquote in the best interest for your mother. The good news is that I have helped hundreds of families in intensive care to get what they want. And I know from experience, and I know the system so well that I know how to stop intensive care teams from withdrawing treatment against your will. I have been there, done that many, many times with much success. The biggest problem for families in intensive care is that they don't know what they don't know, and therefore they don't know what questions to ask. And without asking the right questions and without challenging the intensive care team, you and your family are pretty much doomed. Therefore, positioning your mother's prognosis, her diagnosis, as well as her care and her treatment are key in this situation. If you don't position your mother's prognosis, her diagnosis, as well as her care and her treatment, the intensive care team will do it for you. And as you know by now, they are prepared to quote unquote pull the plug against your will, letting your mother die any minute from now on. It's really time to stand up for your mother, and it's time to continue asking the right questions. Quite frankly, I'm absolutely shocked and horrified that they still haven't done any physiotherapy or physical therapy for your mother. As I mentioned in another article and video where I talk about how to wean a critically ill patient in intensive care off the ventilator and the breathing tube, if they are not following best practice and the guidelines that I refer to in this article and video, they have already given up. And especially since they already trying to refer your mother to hospice, they seem pretty determined to let your mother die without even trying to get her better. As I mentioned before, the biggest problem that ICUs have is that they need their beds because they are in such high demand. Therefore, the easiest way to free up their beds is to try and quote unquote sell you on an end of life situation as being quote unquote in the best interest for your mother, even though you don't agree with it. Well, the biggest challenge for families in intensive care is that they can't read between the lines and they can't interpret the intensive care language accurately. Well, the fact of the matter is that whenever the intensive care team says it's quote unquote in the best interest for your mother, what they really mean is that it's in the best interest for them and their hidden agenda. You may wonder what's their hidden agenda. Well, once again, the biggest challenge for intensive care team is to not have enough resources, including intensive care staff and beds. They would, of course, never tell you about it, and unless you start asking the right questions and unless you start challenging the intensive care team on many levels, you will never get to the bottom of it. I have written about this extensively. For example, I wrote an ebook about the 10 things you didn't know are happening behind the scenes in intensive care that hold you back from making informed decisions, peace of mind, control, power, and influence. And I put a link towards this ebook below the video in the written version of this blog. Go and check it out. Next, generally speaking, I support a tracheostomy, but only after all efforts have been made towards getting your mother off the ventilator and the breathing tube in the first place. Those efforts haven't been maximized yet, and clearly by avoiding answering your questions, they are not open and transparent with you. Again, if they are not doing physical therapy for her chest, they haven't even scratched the surface. They just keep ignoring your and your family's requests. It's what they are used to, and it's because 99% of the families in intensive care don't question, make no informed decisions, have no peace of mind, no power, no control, and no influence whatsoever. Once you start asking the right questions, everything changes. In your and your mother's situation, the following applies. Given that your mother is awake and says she wants a tracheostomy, she clearly says she wants to live. If the doctors continue to bring up withdrawing treatment, it would be clearly against your mother's wishes. Withdrawing treatment and potentially letting your mother die against your and your mother's wishes is called murder in my mind. Their goals is to discharge your mother to either hospice or to long-term acute care, also known as LTAC. Discharging her to hospice is probably quicker from their end because it doesn't require a tracheostomy, and hence they can move her out of ICU quicker. And it doesn't require the efforts to go through a potentially lengthy weaning process of the ventilator and the breathing tube. Next, doing a tracheostomy will allow your mother to be weaned off the ventilator in her own time, and it buys her time. And just as I mentioned to you when I answered your first question, I had some articles and videos linked there that will educate you about when and how to do a tracheostomy. And I put those articles and videos again below this video in the written version of this blog. I generally agree that a tracheostomy is a quick and harmless procedure. Therefore, it can be done quickly with you needing to be there. I can, however, understand that you don't trust them, and I can see why you feel the need to be there when they do the tracheostomy. Overall, I'm still absolutely shocked and horrified in how you and your mother are being dealt with, and I urge you to be persistent and not give up. They will understand what you and your mother are made of if you don't give up. Moving forward, if for whatever reason your mother can't be weaned off the ventilator and the tracheostomy once she has one, there is still plenty of time to revisit your mum's options. Her options would be home care like intensive care at home, and unlike the doctors suggested, there is funding available for intensive care at home because it creates a win-win situation and gives patients and families what they want, and it reduces the cost of an intensive care bed by about 50%. Next, LTAC or long-term acute care, and again, generally speaking, we don't advocate for LTAC because it's long-term acute care, and no LTAC will ever be as equipped and skilled like an intensive care unit to wean a patient off the ventilator. Also, ventilation weaning can also be done at home with a service again like intensive care at home. Another option could potentially be hospice if your mother is really approaching her end of life, but it's way too early to talk about hospice. Also, even if hospice is needed, you could still have your mother at home with intensive care at home and have palliative care at home. I really hope that helps Melissa for now. Do never give up. Don't and never take no for an answer. question everything, keep them on their toes, and be relentless. You are getting much closer to get in the 1% bracket of families in intensive care who make informed decisions, get peace of mind, control, power, and influence. Best wishes from Patrick for now. So, how can you become the best advocate for your critically ill loved one? How can you make informed decisions, get peace of mind, control, power, and influence quickly whilst your loved one is critically ill in intensive care? Well, you get to that all-important feeling of making informed decisions, get peace of mind, control, power, and influence when you download your free Instant Impact Report now by entering your email below. In your free Instant Impact Report, you learn quickly how to make informed decisions, get peace of mind, real power, and real control, and how you can influence decision making fast whilst your loved one is critically ill in intensive care. Your free Instant Impact Report gives you in-depth insight that you must know whilst your loved one is critically ill or is even dying in intensive care. Sign up and download your free Instant Impact Report now by entering your email below. In your free Instant Impact Report, you learn how to speak the secret intensive care language so that the doctors and the nurses know straight away that you are an insider and that you know and understand what is really happening in intensive care. In your free report, you will also discover how to ask the doctors and the nurses the right questions, discover the many competing interests in intensive care, and how your critically ill loved one's treatment may depend on those competing interests, how to eliminate fear, frustration, stress, struggle, and vulnerability, even if your loved one is dying. You get 5 mind-blowing tips and strategies helping you to get on the right path to making informed decisions, get peace of mind, control, power, and influence in your situation. You'll get real-world examples that you can easily adapt to your and your critically ill loved one's situation. How to stop being intimidated by the intensive care team and how you will be seen as equals. You'll get crucial behind-the-scenes insight so that you know and understand what's really happening in intensive care and how you need to manage doctors and nurses in intensive care, and it's not what you think. Thank you for tuning into this week's Your Questions Answered episode, and I'll see you again next week in another update. Make sure you also check out our blog section for more tips and strategies, or simply send me an email to support@intensivecarehotline.com with your questions. Or you can call me, find international phone numbers on our contacts tab. Also, check out our ebook section with more ebooks, videos, and audio recordings. And you can also get one-on-one counseling and consulting with me via Skype over the phone and via email by clicking on the tabs on the top of the website. This is Patrick Hutzel from intensivecarehotline.com, and I'll see you again next week in another update.